Fascinating stuff. Hello everyone, it's Thursday, November 20th, 2008. This is WFTL Bytes, your occasiodaily FOSS and Linux news show with your host, me, Marcel Gagné. Well, before I begin today, I must of course put on my press hat, which is the puffy hat. The puffy hat. I get requests for the puffy hat and I never put on the puffy hat, so today I have the puffy hat on. I'm going to begin with a story from OS Static. As you know, the economy is in shambles. Stock prices are going down. If you had any investments in the stock market, you're probably sitting there crying. I know I did. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that Red Hat apparently is down to $8.76 as of a few minutes ago. Novell is $3.88. Sun Microsystems is also $3.88. Mandriva, 18 cents. SCO, remember SCO? 13 cents. The big question from the story at OS Static is, how low can the price for open source companies go before somebody swoops in and purchases them? Specifically, the company that's doing the best, arguably, with the rosiest outlook, is Red Hat, but that doesn't mean that their stock price isn't collapsing like everyone else's. The argument is that once the market capitalization for some of these companies goes down low enough, somebody like Oracle will just jump in and scoop up Red Hat. And once these sorts of things happen and the last of the open source companies that are publicly traded goes away, it will change the open source software landscape forever. So, will that be a good or a bad thing or indifferent? Linux, it's argued, and open source software will continue to live by virtue of the fact that it's distributed under a license that makes it possible for anyone to start up a company, to distribute the software and so forth. We'll just have to wait and see what happens there. Speaking of money, over at Internet News, they report that Mozilla is reporting a $75 million revenue this last year. That's up from last year's $67 million revenue, which, by the way, is an increase of 12%. Most of that money, by the way, comes from a deal that they struck with Google. You know, when you get Firefox for the first time, it opens up with that Google search page. Well, if you don't change that default search page, every time you do a search on that page, Google drops a few pennies into Mozilla's bank account. Yep, that's how it happens. That deal, by the way, goes to 2011. The bad news is that apparently the IRS is starting to ask questions. They're not actually saying the word audit yet, but they're looking. They're trying to see what's going on out there. By the way, 80% of Mozilla's expenses go to staffing costs. Only 40% of the code that's contributed to to Firefox and other projects actually comes from external contributors who are not employees. Fascinating stuff. There are articles, by the way, over at desktoplinux.com and Computer World as well, that suggest Moonlight, aka Silverlight for Linux, is just about ready to go. If you take a look at the links down at the bottom, I've got the link to the beta page, in case you want to be out there grabbing a copy as soon as it becomes available. Silverlight, of course, is Microsoft's answer to Adobe's Flash Player. For distributing rich content on the web. Now, the Moonlight plugin, which is going to be a plugin, by the way, an open source plugin for Firefox, is being created by the Mono project. And of course, the Mono project is funded by Novell. I'm just going to sort of leave it at that. We'll have to wait and see just how much of a competitor to Flash Microsoft Silverlight actually becomes. Let's face it, not everything that comes out of Redmond is a huge success story, as we all know. They still haven't toppled Google in search. We'll have to wait and see if they are a worthy contributor, not contributor, but competitor to Adobe's Flash. Over at the Linux Journal, there's an article called The Green Penguin. Where does your e-waste go? By my friend James Gray. James is pointing out that the electronic waste that we create, old notebooks, old computers, old monitors, and so forth, is the fastest growing waste in the waste stream. Now, Linux users and FOSS users in general like to pat themselves on the back saying, hey, we can actually reload Linux on old hardware and so forth and extend it and make it last longer and keep it out of the waste stream. And that is true, but eventually all that stuff goes in there, and that's a problem. 90% of all electronic waste or e-waste that goes into the stream isn't recycled. It just goes directly to landfills. Of the remainder, that last 10%, only 20% is what you might actually call recycled. The other 80% is shipped off to developing countries where they process it in ways that, might make an interesting expose over on something like 60 Minutes or W5 or one of these shows. Anyway, and you probably don't want to know what happens to it after they're done with it. But anyhow, there's a new program called eStewards, which is actually, among other things, a certification program, and a group that is working with a number of recyclers to make sure that e-waste is treated appropriately and doesn't go directly into landfill sites and so forth. The article points out that most companies that call themselves e-waste recyclers are actually scammers. They're the ones that are firing that stuff overseas. So, interesting article. Go check it out over at linuxjournal.com. Links are at the bottom. And finally, this may not be specifically a Linux story, but as you might recall, the Human Genome Project was a success partly because it was sequenced on Linux clusters and Linux computers using free and open source software. That's my link on this one here. It's dubious, but hey, I think this is a cool story. The woolly mammoth genome has been sequenced by scientists over at Penn State University. Yes, the woolly mammoth. Maybe we're going to be able to clone one of these things sometime real soon. Here's the scoop. By sequencing the genome, they're hoping to find out why the woolly mammoth went extinct, and, by extension, why other species on the planets are faced with extinction. Actually, I have some ideas about why certain species on the planet are faced with extinction. Yes, did you know, by the way, that we are going through the largest mass extinction in the history of the planet? Yes, even more so than at the time of the dinosaurs and so forth. And you know what I think is responsible? People. That's just a guess. Global warming, waste, natural habitats being destroyed. I'm just guessing, but it's a cool story anyway. Woolly mammoth. I have a question for you. If you were going to clone some prehistoric animal, what would it be? Stegosaurus? Tyrannosaurus Rex? Leave me a comment down at the bottom. What would you want to have cloned? Personally, I'd love to go to a dinosaur theme park. That would be so cool. And I'm not afraid of getting eaten because I know Unix. Yes, I know it's an old reference. But hey, on that note, I think I'm done. Talk to you later. Bye.